again, and it's entitled World Finance Chiefs Heading for Washington for Crunch Talks. Finance chiefs from the world's richest nations are set to meet in Washington for a crucial but uncertain meeting at a time of unprecedented fear about the global financial system. The Group of Seven meeting will bring together finance ministers and central bankers on Friday from the United States. This is this last Friday, or it's Sunday today. From the United States, Germany, Japan, France, Britain, Italy, and Canada for some collective thinking on the credit crunch and crashing stocks. Cutting Edge says, you can rest assured that the solution toward these G7 ministers are supposedly working is a solution planned many, many years ago. And if these talks fail, it will be because the Illuminati wants exponentially to drive the pressure upward so that people will panic even more and will demand that the global elite carry out whatever action they deem necessary in order to restore order, financial stability, and wealth to the financial system. Please take time to read the news articles which reveal the government's ownership, government control, and government regulation with the financial crisis that it provides. Now, I understand with this bailout, the government is taking over more and more and more, essentially buying up and buying out the private sector. And this is where we get into the whole concept of fascism. Because the government now is seizing control of institutions they have no business seizing control of. The first article they recommend reading, and I'm just going to read you the titles. This is from CNBC News. These are all from October 9th, save one was October 8th. U.S. government to start buying stakes in banks by month's end. They're going to be buying up the banks. And the next one is from Bloomberg Financial News. UK may own 30% of big banks in bailout plan. UK, 30% of banks. People's Daily Online says EU calls for greater bailout bid. Bloomberg Financial, Paulson says U.S. to use all authorities in crises. Now, the next article is from a guy named Lyndon LaRouche, this big-time economist, and it's entitled A New Monetary System is the Only Option for Humanity Now. That's what he says. This is from Washington, D.C. This was back in May 1st, but it's as pertinent today, more pertinent right now than it was back then. In his opening statement at the LaRouche PAC webcast in Washington, D.C., Lyndon LaRouche emphasized the urgent necessity of replacing the hopelessly bankrupt world monetary financial system. Now, he's not just saying America. He's saying the whole world monetary financial system. And again, what we're going to have initially is, once we get into this, is a one world currency. It's going to be bigger than even the Amero or the Euro. It's going to be a one world currency. That's what Lyndon LaRouche is saying that we have to have in order for humanity to survive. That's what he says, not what I say. Okay? He says, then what must happen if civilization is to be continued on this planet? I mean, nothing like taking the Lord Jesus Christ totally out of the picture. It's all, you notice this is all man-centered? Every solution is, there's no talk of turning to the Lord Jesus Christ and these types of things. And, I just thought I should mention that because it's never even a part of their equation. But their father is the devil, so they're not going to turn to the Lord Jesus Christ in regard to this matter. So he says, what must happen if civilization is to be continued on this planet, it must happen very rapidly, is that the United States must enter into an agreement with Russia, China, India, and other countries to establish immediately an emergency new international monetary system, based in conception on the precedent of Franklin Roosevelt's launching of the Bretton Woods system in the period of 1944-45. This must happen, and it can happen. LaRouche continued, Russia has already indicated through President Putin repeatedly and through others, and I have some considerable investigation in this matter, an interest in working together with the United States, perhaps not with the jokers who are presently sitting in Washington, in the White House, and similar places. In other words, to have this one world currency. Then he goes on to say that is the only option for humanity right now. The time frame is immediate. You talk about a fearmonger. I got this guy that feeds me all this LaRouche guy's stuff. You talk about a fearmonger. You talk about a guy that's on board for the New World Order. Then he goes on to say, because this entire system is presently hopelessly bankrupt, it is being held together by pins and needles and chewing gum. Well, I mean, I agree. But, you know, this guy's very, very aggressive. He's more aggressive than just about anybody I've seen. Now, anyway, so that was his take on things. Here's another article from Bloomberg. This is from October 10th, okay, just 2 days ago. And it's entitled, Berlusconi says leaders may close world markets, by Steve Schreier. This is Bloomberg News, October 10th. And he says Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi said political leaders are discussing the idea of closing the world's financial markets while they, quote, rewrite the rules of international finance. The idea of suspending the markets for a time it takes to rewrite the rules is being discussed. Berlusconi said that after a cabinet meeting in Naples, Italy, a solution to the financial crisis, quote, can't just be for one country or even just for Europe, but global. Okay, so they're talking about suspending the world markets so that they can rewrite the rules and establish a global solution. Do you see how this is very, very New World Order oriented? How it very much lines up with Daniel and Revelation in regard to this one world system? Here's another one. This is from Reuters, entitled Global Bank Holiday Worth a Thought. And foreign exchange analytics David Gilmour says markets should prepare for another coordinated rate cut next week. Now that's the week we're going into now. And I believe, well here, I'll just read this. And this time he predicts Japan, with its 0.5% benchmark rate, will participate. He adds that, quote, while I would not count on a global bank holiday next week, one would make sense to me, particularly with the scheduled U.S. and Japanese bank holidays on Monday. So in other words, I believe it's Columbus Day on Monday. So that's considered a bank holiday. But we're talking about something that would extend the supposed bank holiday. And again, the reason they would do that is you know, to rework things, to establish or move us toward this global banking system. He says, quote, again, this is a remote option, but it's not to be ruled out. The main focus, he says, must be on government efforts to restore solvency in the banking system, and that process will be taking place in Washington and not on Wall Street. Well, a lot of people, I had put out something previously of a guy that had predicted a global bank holiday, and I always try to put out a warning saying, you know, listen, I can't say 100% this is going to happen, but there's sure a lot of people that are posturing toward that, okay? So, and again, that's why we're going over several different articles today. They pretty much all point to the same conclusion. This next article is entitled Worst Week for Global Markets Since 1929. This is from October 11th, okay? And today's the 12th, so this was just yesterday. So again, this is pretty up-to-the-minute news as far as what I get into. World stock market values plummeted Friday. This was last Friday. Ending a week that saw the biggest collapse in shares since 1929. Do you understand what I just read? The biggest collapse in shares since 1929, the start of the Great Depression? That's exactly what I'm in reference to. The looming threat of a world depression provided the backdrop for a meeting of finance ministers from G7 industrialized countries who gather in Washington for emergency talks with U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson and Federal Reserve Board Chairman Ben Bernanke. After a day of panic selling on markets from Asia to Europe, the Latin America, and wild swings on the U.S. stock market, the G7 issued a statement that pledged to place the resources of their respective countries at the disposal of the most powerful banks. So these G7, the top financial nations in the world, the G7 issued a statement that pledged to place the resources of their respective countries at the disposal of the most powerful banks. In other words, oh, Mr. Banker, we'll do whatever you want. We're the 7 most powerful countries, and we'll do whatever it takes. And the bankers are the most corrupt, wicked, and evil institutions just about on the planet. And they're just basically saying, okay, we'll just submit to you, Mr. Banker. Then it goes on to say, but it failed to outline any specific